All right, we're diving straight into some pretty sensitive data points today. Numbers that, when you put them all together, might just be telling us something really important about our collective future. Let's get into it.
So, let's kick things off with a big question. Is it possible that humanity's future is already being written, right now, in the health data we're seeing today?
Let's start with a number that's pretty hard to ignore: 50 to 60%. That's the estimated drop in global sperm counts since the 1970s. I mean, that is a huge biological shift in what is really just a couple of generations.
And it doesn't stop there. On top of that, you have a steady 1% drop in average testosterone levels year over year for decades. So what this means is, a 25-year-old man today, well, his biological starting point is just fundamentally different than his father's was at the same age.
And to round out this initial picture, here's our third data point. The rate of erectile dysfunction in men under 40 has basically doubled in recent decades. Something that was once mostly seen as an issue of aging is now popping up more and more in younger generations.
Okay, so you've got these three really potent, very personal health trends. But what happens when you stop looking at them as just individual problems and you start seeing them as inputs for some pretty serious population-level math?
And this, right here, is the crucial pivot. These aren't just personal health stats you'd talk to your doctor about. For demographers, the scientists who model populations, these are critical inputs. They're fundamental signals about our very ability to reproduce as a species.
Okay, so let's bring this down from the abstract and see how it actually plays out at a national level. We're going to focus on the United States, where these exact trends are being plugged into models that try to project the country's future.
Now this is where things get really interesting. Look at the standard consensus projection for the US in the year 2100, about 367 million people. Okay, but now look what happens when the models factor in what they call severe headwinds. Things just like the health trends we saw. The projection drops, and drops hard, all the way to 286 million. That's a difference of over 80 million people. It's like an entire country's worth of population vanishing from a forecast, all based on which variables you decide to include.
So what exactly is inside this severe case? Well, as you can see, it's a whole mix of social and biological factors. Everything from people choosing to partner up later in life to the direct health drag from things like subfertility. Now, it's really important to get this. For the people who build these models, these are just mathematical inputs. They're not making a moral judgment. They're just plugging in variables to see what kind of future they might point to.
All right, now let's pull the camera way, way back, from just one country to the entire planet. Because when you start applying this kind of thinking on a global scale, the questions get a lot bigger. You start touching on the long-term survival of our species itself.
To really get a handle on the global picture, there's one key metric you absolutely need to know: the total fertility rate, or TFR. It's super simple. It's just the average number of children born per woman. And the magic number to burn into your brain is 2.1. That's the replacement level, the number you need to hit to keep the population perfectly stable generation after generation.
So where do we stand right now? Well, at first glance, that global average of 2.2, you might think, okay, we're good. We're above that 2.1 magic number. But dig a little deeper. The US is already way down at 1.6. In large parts of Europe and East Asia, they're hovering around 1.2 or 1.3. In those places, a generation is absolutely not replacing itself.
Now, if you just draw a straight line from these trends, the math takes you to some, well, frankly, some pretty startling places. For instance, one demographic model calculates a potential extinction date of 2394 if the current downward trends just continue on their path completely unchecked. If you factor in something huge like a societal collapse, well, that date gets even closer. Okay, take a breath. That sounds absolutely terrifying. But is it actually realistic? Because we all know the future is never, ever a simple straight line. So let's add a much-needed dose of reality to this whole story.
Yeah, because the future isn't some smooth, predictable line on a graph, right? The real world is messy. It's volatile. It's filled with unpredictable shocks, things like wars, pandemics, massive economic depressions, that can completely change the course of history in a heartbeat.
So how do you even begin to model a messy future like that? Well, you build what's called a shock model. You start with that same declining trend we've been talking about, but then you digitally bombard it with random shocks over and over again. You run thousands of these chaotic simulations to map out the entire range of possible futures, not just one single line. You can really think of it as a stress test for humanity.
So, what did this giant stress test actually find? The results are really fascinating. Out of 3,000 different simulations, just look at that bar all the way on the right, in the vast majority of possible futures, even with all those constant shocks thrown in, our population does not fall below 1 billion by the year 3000. It suggests we're actually more resilient than those simple, straight-line models would have you believe. So the big insight here, the really crucial takeaway from this much better model, is this. Yes, the decline seems to be real, but our trajectory looks a lot more like a long, slow fade over centuries, not a sudden, dramatic plunge off a cliff. The shocks might wound us, but in most of these simulated futures, they don't deliver a knockout blow.
So after looking at individual health, national projections, and these complex global models, what's the bottom line? What should we really take away from all this data?
A quote from the source material just nails it perfectly. The mathematical signal is not apocalypse tomorrow, but a slow fade. The data isn't screaming that the world is about to end, but it is signaling a profound and very long transformation ahead of us. And that leaves us with one last and maybe the most important question of all. These models, they just show a possible trajectory. But trends aren't the same thing as destiny. So the real question becomes, what levers, social, medical, technological, could we actually pull to change this course? That's the challenge this data forces us to confront.